Good morning, this is Robin Padgey, and today we're talking about performance management. There is a cycle when it comes to performance management. Unfortunately, I'm not clever enough to figure out how to do that on a PowerPoint presentation, so I have bullet points. But just imagine that these bullet points go around in a circle. And the circle begins with the first bullet point, planning work and setting expectations. And so what we're going to do is discuss each one of these elements in depth to help you help people with their performance. When you're in a supervisory position, your job is to help the people you supervise be successful. And this is a tool to help you do that. I do want to invite you to send any questions in along the broadcast if you'd like to, and I'll be able to answer them at the end of it. So before you begin the entire cycle, it's a good idea to review your job description. Hopefully you have job descriptions for each of the positions that you have. And if you don't, a good time to create the job description is when you're going to hire somebody to fill a position. I used to not understand the importance of job descriptions, but they are very important throughout the entire employment relationship. When you're going to hire people, when you are managing their performance, when people get sick or hurt and doctors need to evaluate whether they can return to duty. So job descriptions are very important tools in order to help you manage the performance process. So hopefully they're in existence, hopefully they're up to date. If they're not up to date, a good time to update them, again, is when you're going to hire somebody for a position or when you are going to do an annual performance review. And hopefully you're doing annual performance reviews. Sometimes employers stop doing them when they can't give raises. And that's not a good practice for a couple of reasons. First of all, the raise should not be tied to the performance evaluation. And I now know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's creating a Pavlov dog kind of effect when you have raises with the performance evaluation. People really aren't paying attention to what you're saying during the evaluation process. They're just waiting to hear how much of a raise they're going to get. And so one of the reasons employers tended to stop giving performance evaluations is that people expected a raise. And if there was no raise, then no need to have a performance evaluation. Not true. It's important to continue performance evaluations even when raises are not tied to them. And plus, don't give the raise at the same time as the performance evaluation. Give it later. Preferably, everybody gets a raise at the same time so that people don't come to expect a raise when they are given a performance evaluation. So a good time to update that job description is when you are evaluating somebody, because their evaluation should be based upon that job description. And that's one of the things that employers and supervisors frequently do, is that they have a job description, but they never look at it. And the employee never looks at it. And it should be the basis of the evaluation. What are you evaluating people on? Their performance. What is their performance? It's based upon what the job description says they're supposed to be doing. And then finally, you want to make sure always that your employees are properly classified. And so that annual performance evaluation, or when you are hiring somebody new, especially, to ensure that that job position is properly classified as exempt or non-exempt. Now, if you're not sure what these terms mean, exempt is a salaried position and non-exempt is an hourly position. But just because you give somebody a salary doesn't mean they're exempt. And so people have to be able to meet certain criteria in order to be exempt from overtime. And if you classify them as exempt and don't pay them overtime when they really are non-exempt and should be paying overtime, that's going to cost you some money if anybody ever figures that out. So that's all I'm going to say about those. If you need some additional help or you have some questions about exemptions, please let us know, because it's very important to make sure you're classifying people correctly. Employers are hit with huge lawsuits based upon misclassifying people, usually class action lawsuits, which means there's lots of people involved in it. So you want to make sure you got that one correct. So when you are hiring somebody for the to get started, or you're promoting somebody into a new position, or even when you're doing the annual performance evaluation, the first step is to plan work and set expectations. This is a really difficult thing to do. One of the reasons it's difficult is because people have different perceptions of what's being said or even what's on a written page in front of them. So what this process is supposed to do is establish objectives or expectations for the coming evaluation period, often in collaboration with the employee. Now, when you're hiring somebody, you won't be collaborating with them about what you expect from them. But after somebody's been around for a while, you certainly want it to be a collaborative effort. What are the expectations that both of you have? So the employer has expectations of the employee, but what would the employee like to accomplish as well and to be evaluated on? And so this should be a conversation, not a one-way directive, as people have been around for a while. Provides an upfront, mutually understood and accepted basis for reviewing and discussing performance results. Now, the phrase there, mutually understood, if you've taken any communication workshops with me, that should ring a bell, because communication means when the sender of the message and the receiver of the message have mutual understanding of the message. This is very difficult to achieve. If you're paying attention to your communication with other people, you will notice that there is often misunderstanding. I had a discussion with a friend of mine Sunday evening, and we had so much misunderstanding between us, I'm surprised that we even were able to communicate at all. So the thing is that people have different understandings of what's being said. And often when somebody is hired and you're going through this process for the first time with them, they don't want to ask questions because they don't want to appear foolish. And so they just nod their head, and usually we think that people understand. One of my favorite quotes is, the biggest problem with communication is the illusion we have achieved it. All too often, we think that we are clearly understood, and we're not. But we ask the receiver, do you understand? And they nod their heads. Do you have any questions? No, they shake their heads, and off they go, and we think that we're good, and then they don't give us the results that we want. And what we often do then is to blame them and not blame ourselves. So this process of going through the expectations, especially when somebody is new to a position, is time consuming. It takes a lot of back and forth to make sure that people understand what the expectations are of them. And the reason for that is that they're going to be evaluated on those expectations. And it's not fun when you evaluate somebody poorly and they don't understand why, and they thought they were doing what they were supposed to do, and they're not. And so this takes a lot of time and effort for mutual understanding of those expectations. But I'm going to give you a tool that will help you achieve mutual understanding in just a moment. It reduces misunderstandings about the results the employee is expected to achieve. So again, it's not fun when you tell somebody they're not doing a good job when they think they are, and they don't understand why they're being criticized for that. And the thing is, again, on this communication, people hear what they hear, not necessarily what's been said. And I learned this lesson a while ago when I hired a secretary from Sacramento. And on her interview, I told her that she would receive a certain rate of pay. And she said that she had received $4 an hour more in her position in Sacramento. And I said, well, the cost of living in Sacramento is higher than it is here, and this is a competitive rate here in Bakersfield. And she said, is there any way I can make more money? And I said, at the end of your 3-month introductory period, we'll evaluate your performance, and perhaps you can receive an increase at that time, is what I said. What she heard was she was receiving a $4 an hour increase in 3 months. And so 3 months later, she arrived at my door with her hand out, and when I told her that's not what I said, she thought I was lying to her and hated me ever after. So this is one of the reasons this entire process is so important, and a lot of it should be in writing. What I should have done with that secretary is, following that conversation, I should have sent her an email summarizing what I had said to ensure that she understood it. But I neglected to do so. And so now I don't neglect to do so. And then finally, planning work and setting expectations helps the employee to self-monitor their progress. And how do they self-monitor? Well, I'm going to give you a tool called SMART goals or SMART objectives. And when these are clearly laid out for employees, you don't have to tell them how they're doing. They know how they're doing because they are able to tell whether they're hitting their goals or they're not hitting their goals. And so all of this goes into setting work and planning work and setting expectations. So here's that SMART goal or SMART objective that I told you about. This is a great tool for helping set clear expectations and helping to evaluate people objectively. And that's very important to evaluate them objectively because all too often they think they are not being evaluated objectively. They think that you are biased against them when they receive a poor evaluation. So this helps protect employers and supervisors when people accuse them of being unfair. It's clearly laid out, and so there should be no misunderstandings about what's expected. So here we go. What is a SMART goal or SMART objective? Well, the acronym stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Being specific is critical because, again, people have different perspectives of what's being said and what's expected. And so as specific as you can get, the more likely you're going to get the result that you want. Measurable, it really helps when things can be measured. They can't always be measured, but if they can, you want to try to do it. Attainable, goals need to be attainable. If employees can't attain them, then you're going to have a very unhappy employee. They need to be relevant to what the job is all about, what the company is all about. If you're giving people busy work or work that they don't understand the relevance of, then they're going to be unhappy. And so SMART objectives are relevant to what the company is trying to achieve. And they're time-based. You need to have timelines on things to make sure that you get the results that you want. I had a supervisor tell me one time, I don't believe in telling people what time limits they should have on things that I give them to do. They're professionals. They should get things back to me in a timely manner. That's setting yourself up for defeat. First of all, what's a timely manner? What's timely to you is probably different than what's timely to me. For example, when you tell employees they need to work on time, and they have a different idea of what on time means, and you have to clearly spell it out to people. And so all of these things are SMART goals. Now, let me tell you some examples of some SMART goals. But before we do, let's talk a little bit more about what you can do to help employees achieve what you want them to achieve. First of all, performance expectations can also include the quality that you're looking for. This is very difficult to communicate. That's why quantity is much easier, and you want to try to quantify things as much as you possibly can. So, for example, quality. If you were to tell somebody, I want this place cleaned up, what is cleaned up to you might be different than what is cleaned up to them. And so that's why quality is very difficult to describe. So if you're trying to achieve a certain quality, using visual aids really helps with that, as opposed to just verbally. And then again, timeliness, how fast you need things to be produced in order to get the results that you want. So here are some SMART goals that I had once upon a time. So I went to work with some employment attorneys at a law firm to set up a human resources division for our clients. And so we are providing human resources to human resources people. And so these are things that were developed for me in that effort. First of all, we had clients who would call up and say, you know what, I know that we're supposed to have personnel files, but I don't know what's supposed to be in them or not in them. I don't know what they're supposed to look like. Do you have an example for me? Well, at that time, we did not. So it became a SMART goal for me. And hiring package for new employees. So we would have clients say, I know that I'm supposed to give new employees information, pamphlets, forms, but I don't know what I'm supposed to give them. And so do you have some sample or example that you can give me? At the time, we did not. So that's why it became a SMART goal. So let's see if this truly is a SMART goal. Develop a model employee personnel file and hiring package for new employees. Is that specific? Yeah. And sometimes people say, well, you don't know what a model personnel file and hiring package is supposed to include. Well, that's why I needed to find out what they were supposed to include. And so perhaps I needed to do a little research. But yeah, it's specific. Is it measurable? Well, I was supposed to complete these within a 3-month time period. And so I needed to develop one personnel file and one hiring package within a 3-month period. So yeah, it's measurable. Was it attainable? I better be able to get that done in 3 months or I need to find a new job. Was it relevant to what we were trying to accomplish? Yes, we were providing human resources services for human resources professionals. So yes, it was relevant to what we were trying to accomplish, and time-based. Again, it was a quarterly goal, so there was my time limit. Submit a new form or article for the website every week. So our clients have access to forms on our website. And also I write articles for publications that try to help employers and supervisors comply with HR issues that they need to comply with. And so what we needed to do was to build up that website so that we had forms and articles available for our clients. So it became a SMART goal. Submit a new form or article for the website every week. So every week for 3 months. Is that specific? Yeah, I knew what an HR form was supposed to entail. Was it measurable? Yeah, one every week. Was it attainable? Yes. Creating a new form often is not difficult. Sometimes it's just a paragraph and then a signature line. Was it relevant to what we were trying to accomplish? Yes. Building up the resources that we're able to provide. And time-based? Yeah, once again, it was a quarterly goal. And then finally, set up 3 speaking engagements at clubs, trade associations, groups, etc. So one of the things that I do is help to market our organization. And I do that through speaking engagements, chambers of commerce, Kiwanis, Rotaries. I'll speak anywhere. If you want me to come speak to your group, contact me. I'll do it. So here was the goal. Set up 3 speaking engagements at clubs, trade associations, groups, etc. Specific? Yeah. Measurable? I needed 3. Attainable? Yeah. At the beginning of this effort, I would have to call people up and ask them if I could go speak, but now those speaking gigs come to me pretty regularly. Is it relevant to what we're trying to accomplish? Yes. Again, marketing our companies so that we would get clients. And then was it time-based? Yeah. Quarterly goal again. So the moral of the story is that a SMART goal only needs to be a sentence. It doesn't need to be some elaborate thing. It's just important so that people know exactly what's expected of them. And then they are able to monitor their performance as well. So at the end of this quarter, I didn't need to go to my boss, or my boss didn't need to come to me and tell me how I did. I went to my boss and told him how I did. After you set expectations, you need to observe performance. Now, there are different ways that supervisors and employers observe performance. Some people are able to directly observe. They're right there with the employee, observing what the employee does. But very few people are able to do that. And so how they observe performance also is through reports and records generated by the employee. And so reports and records, this is anything tangible. And so if you tell somebody to build a box, you look at the box, and that's observing their performance is by what the result of their activities. And so there are finance reports, or there are payroll records, or there are just a variety of things you can look at depending upon your profession. So it is just whatever the employee has completed based upon the activity that they were engaged in. Communication from the employee can also tell you. And so when you're observing performance, certainly if the employee is saying, I don't know what I'm doing, or please help me to understand, then you can observe their performance. But sometimes employees tell you how they're doing without them meaning to. And I have an example of that. I was meeting with a client in the healthcare field before operation, and before their hours of operation. not before I had an operation. And we were meeting with their quality control officer. And so we were standing in the lobby before the doors opened and discussing an issue. And then it was time for business, and a patient walked through the door. So the manager and the employer and I looked at the patient and looked back at each other. The employer and I expected the quality control manager to go over and assist the patient, but instead she turned back to us and she said, "Oh, he can wait." So that communication from the employee let us know that she either didn't know the expectations of her job or she needed to be in a different position. Comments from coworkers can help you observe the performance of your employees. Of course, you need to be very careful about this because sometimes coworkers are telling you untruths, and so make sure that if you are going to act upon anything that they tell you, that you find out all of the facts. And then comments from customers can help you observe performance. Now, again, you need to be careful about this because sometimes customers will tell you things they're not exactly true about your employee. And so if they're glowing comments, then great, believe that. But if they're critical comments, do some investigating in order to ensure that they have their facts straight. This is some of the things that get in the way to us objectively observing people. Now, objective observation means there's no bias. We just see what is. That's very difficult for a few reasons. One is the halo effect. So the halo effect is when you like somebody. And so anything that you see or hear about that person is going to be in a favorable light for the most part. This is like when you have a child and somebody tells you something bad about your child. Not my child. My child would never do that. Maybe your child would, but not mine. So these are people who see things in a better light or see people in a better light than maybe they actually are. I had an experience once that perfectly demonstrates this. I was meeting a client for the first time, and when I met her, she said to me, "My gosh, you're gorgeous." Well, I felt great about myself until I walked her past this fake tree that we had in our lobby, and I thought this fake tree was one of the most hideous things I'd ever seen. The client looked at the tree and she said, "My gosh, that's gorgeous." So everything in her world was gorgeous, which is a wonderful world to live in. But that is the halo effect in effect. Then there's a double effect, which is the opposite. And so if you have some folks that you supervise that you do not like, perhaps that is coloring the observation that you have of their performance. And so you need to be really careful about that because when you don't like somebody, usually they know it. And if you give them a poor evaluation, usually they think it's because you don't like them. That's where those SMART goals help you because they help you objectively observe performance. And often when you give a poor evaluation of someone, they say that they're being treated unfairly and might even take action because of feeling that they've been discriminated against. That's where the SMART goals protect you. The bandwagon effect. And so when you just jump on the bandwagon, and if you're fairly young, you probably don't know what that phrase means, but it means that somebody tells you something and you believe it without finding out for yourself. And so, for example, you have somebody who is coming to work for you, and you know someone who used to work with that person, and they tell you about that person, and you believe it before you even meet that person. So that is a barrier to objective observation. And then finally, extreme aversion. And extreme aversion are those folks who just like things right in the middle. They don't want to be too to the left or too to the right in political terms. In evaluating people, they don't believe that anybody ever rates excellent. They just believe that things should be right in the middle. And I had an example of this. I was training with an organization, and employees were evaluating my performance on a piece of paper, and they could evaluate me according to excellent, very good, good, fair, and poor on a variety of elements. And one participant folded up his paper and tossed it onto the table after the workshop. And I saw him do it. And so after the workshop, I opened up the paper, and the participant had just circled all of the goods, just a big giant circle around all of the goods on the paper. And so the next time I saw that participant, I said, hey, I'm glad you're in my workshop because I've improved it and I want a better evaluation out of you. And his response was, good is as good as it gets. In his worldview, there's no very good, there's no excellent. Good is as good as it gets. That's extreme aversion. And so that is not fair to people. When we get to performance evaluations, we'll talk more about this. But if you don't believe in rating somebody over good, because good is as good as it gets, you're going to have some unhappy employees. Now, I think one of the reasons that that supervisor rated everything right down the middle was because their performance evaluations had 3 categories: unsatisfactory, satisfactory, above satisfactory. Now, when the supervisors evaluated people, if they rated them below satisfactory, they had to write a comment. They rated them above satisfactory, they had to write a comment. So guess what everybody got? Right down the middle, satisfactory. That way you get your performance evaluation completed in 1 minute and you're off to the next one. That's a bad idea. And the reason for that is that if you have somebody who's performing above satisfactory and they only get a satisfactory, they're not going to perform for you. And if you rate somebody who is below satisfactory as satisfactory, when you finally go to fire that person, that performance evaluation that says that their performance was satisfactory is going to be the first exhibit in the lawsuit. So you've got to rate people what they deserve to be rated. And it's going to take some time and it's going to take some energy. But if you do it along the way, that will take less time and less energy at the evaluation process. So we'll get there in just a moment. So I used to teach at the University of Phoenix, and I taught a critical thinking class along with other classes. And this was an evaluation that one of the students in the class wrote on the evaluation sheet. The instructor spent more time trying to impress the class with what she knew rather than help to learn the subject. I'm interested in learning and getting my degree than trying to be impressed with an ego-centered instructor. I am paying for my education out of my pocket. I am not getting any support and do not appreciate wasting my money. The instructor waited too long before helping us to get focused on the final paper and presentation. The debate portion of the class was useless. Ouch! This was an evaluation about me. But then there was this evaluation. Robin Paggi is a great teacher. I learned so much in this class. I would recommend this class because there is a lot of great information for critical thinking. So 2 students in the same class had these different evaluations. Why is the first one so wrong and the second one obviously accurate? Well, maybe they're both accurate. Who knows? But the thing is, why can you have such different perspectives in the same class? Perhaps the first student didn't like me. The double effect was in effect. Maybe the second student did like me, so the halo effect. Who knows? All I know is that when you are evaluating people and they get an evaluation like this, they're going to think, well, you just don't like me. And when they get an evaluation like this, they're going to think, you're exactly right. So how do you protect yourself from being accused of being unfair, that you just don't like the person? Smart goals, smart objectives. That way, they either did it or they didn't. And so let's go back to the goals that I had once upon a time. Develop a model employee personnel file and hiring package for new employees. I either did it or I didn't do it. Submit a new formal article for the website every week. I either did it or I didn't do it. set up 3 speaking engagements. Again, it's done, it's not done. And that's what you evaluate people on. And that helps you be objective. And so when you set these expectations up with them at the beginning of the evaluation process, and then at the end of it, you tell them they did it or they didn't do it, there should be no unhappy surprises if they didn't do it, because they already know they didn't do it and they're ready for that evaluation. All right, so after you are observing people, you need to give them feedback. Now, the purpose of giving feedback is to let people know how they're doing. If they are doing a good job, you want to tell them so that they will continue to do a good job. If they are doing a bad job, you need to tell them so that they can correct it. Now, every time we communicate is to get a desired response. And so when you are going to give feedback with somebody, think of the response that you want. If you're telling them that they're not meeting expectations, you want them to respond with something like, oh, my bad, let me try harder, or tell me what I'm supposed to do. But it's all in how you deliver the message on whether you get the response back that you want. Well, not always, but a lot of times. And so ineffective feedback is feedback that is delivered that gets a bad response. And so the sender is setting themselves up for failure because of how they deliver the message. So here's ineffective feedback. It attacks the person, hard-hitting, aggressive, focusing on the weaknesses of the other person. I was coaching a supervisor who was sent to me to help improve his communication skills. And one of the things that he had said to somebody, a subordinate did not do his job to the supervisor's satisfaction. And the supervisor told him he was basically worthless. All right, so when you give somebody some feedback like that, it doesn't really inspire them to do their job. It inspires them to complain to their employer, and then inspires the supervisor to have to get one-on-one coaching. So attacking the other person was not going to get you the results that you want. Feedback that's so indirect that people don't know what's being said. I watched a supervisor fire a subordinate, and the subordinate did not know that he was being fired. And that sounds too ridiculous to be true, but I was there. It happened. The supervisor said things like, perhaps you might be happier someplace else. And the subordinate's response was, no, I don't think so. So you've got to be direct enough so that people know what you're talking about. So if you are someone who doesn't like to hurt people's feelings, and so you suggest things, you're very tactful, sometimes people don't know what you're saying. I remember I took a position as a secretary 25 years ago, and the person who had my position was promoted. And so she was still in the office. And she said to me once, you know, Robin, when I was in your position, I used to do such and such. And I thought, well, okay, don't know why you're telling me this, but all right. 20 years later, I finally got that she was telling me I should do that too. I didn't get it. So if you're talking to a very direct person and you're indirect and you're trying to hint at issues, they're probably not going to get it, and you're not going to get the results that you want. Ineffective feedback is insensitive, little concern for the needs of the other person. And so anytime you're telling somebody that they're not performing to your expectations, they're not going to like it. And so being prepared for the fact that people's feelings are going to get hurt to a certain degree and forming your message with that in mind is going to get you a better response. But if you're just, I don't care about people's feelings, this is a job, then you're probably not going to get the results that you want. Feedback that's disrespectful. So again, feedback is demeaning, bordering on insulting. So the supervisor that I told you about, who said that his subordinate was worthless, told his subordinate that he was worthless, also did this. The subordinate apologized to him, and the employee or the supervisor said to the employee, don't apologize, only women apologize. So I don't know if that was so demeaning toward that employee. It's certainly demeaning toward women. So that kind of stuff that people say doesn't get them the results that they want. It gets them sent to me for coaching. Judgmental feedback is evaluative, judging personality rather than behavior. So one of the things that I encourage you to do is take the word attitude out of your vocabulary. And the reason for that is that that is judging personality. Telling somebody that they have a bad attitude, it's not effective. And the reason it's not effective for the most part is that attitude is something that people feel. And you can't tell people what they feel. You can only tell them what you see. And so why would you think that somebody has a bad attitude? They don't show up for work on time. All right, then that's what you talk to them about, is not showing up to work on time. They roll their eyes when you talk to them. Then that's what you talk to them about, is rolling their eyes. That they are grumpy, then that's what you talk to them about, is being grumpy. So don't tell people they have a bad attitude, because they can argue that. I don't have a bad attitude. I like my job. Talk to them about their behavior. And feedback is ineffective when it's general, aimed at broad issues which cannot be easily defined. So I had a supervisor tell me one time, Robin, you don't always practice what you preach. Now, that really bothered me, because all the advice I give to people on what they should do, I try to do myself. And so it bothered me that she said, I don't always practice what I preach. And so I asked her, well, like what? What do I do, or what don't I do? And her response was, oh, I don't know. I just noticed a few times that you didn't practice what you preached. All right, well, that's not helpful. And so one of the things about feedback is that it's supposed to be helpful. And when you are just general, people don't know what to fix. Ineffective feedback, poor timing, given long after the prompting event. So there are some folks that hate to tell people they're not meeting their expectations. So they put it off and put it off and put it off. And then they say something. Well, that's no good, because all this time has been wasted where this person could have improved, and they weren't given the opportunity to do so. Or at the worst possible time. So one of the things, there's some personality styles who like to get things done quickly so they can get it off the list and move on to the next thing. And so they'll tell somebody on a Friday afternoon that they're not meeting their expectations. And then the person has to think about it all weekend long. Or they tell them Monday morning, first thing when they come to work. And now that starts their day off and their week off badly. So timing is essential to get the response that you want. Impulsive. So there are some folks who they don't think before they speak. They just blat it out there. And then a lot of times what they said just made even more of a mess of things. And so impulsive gets people in trouble. They don't get the results that they want because they haven't thought about what they're going to say. And then selfish, feedback that meets the giver's needs rather than the needs of the other person. And so this is the person who's giving feedback in order to make themselves feel better about it, that the receiver of the message really doesn't need the feedback, but that the sender of the message just likes to give it in order to feel better about themselves. So here's an example of that. I had a supervisor one time tell me, Robin, I received an email complimenting your performance. Yay! I know how you need your pats on the back, so I'll forward it to you. Oh, okay. So this inspires me to tell you to get rid of the word but when you're giving feedback. Now, it really doesn't work in this, but this always just reminds me of that. And the reason it does is because if you tell an employee something like, you're a great employee, but you need to work on this, everything that comes before that but is negated. And that's what happened with this. I received an email complimenting your performance. That was negated with the, I know how you need your pats on the back, so I'll forward it to you. Because all I walked away with was, wow, I'm really needy. So get rid of the but. You're a great employee, but no. Use the word and instead. You're a great employee, and I want to tell you how to be even better. You did a nice job on this, and I want to tell you how to improve. Now, you don't always have to tell somebody something good in order to tell them something bad. That's a management technique that was taught a long time ago. If you're going to tell somebody they're not meeting performance, you tell them what they're doing right. If you want to, you can. If it's warranted, you can, but don't feel that you need to. You're a great employee, but you burned down the building and you're really not supposed to do that. No, you don't need to do that. And other people have been taught the sandwich effect. Tell something good, then tell something bad, finish up with something good. Again, you don't need to do that. And most of the time, employees can see right through that. They know what's coming. And so don't feel that anytime you deliver negative news, you have to say something positive. Now, effective feedback is the opposite of ineffective feedback. And so just do the opposite. But I want to go through these slowly so that you understand the importance of what you're trying to achieve here. What you're giving feedback on, for the most part, is that people are not meeting your expectations. Because usually when they're meeting your expectations, you should be giving feedback, but that's easy to do. It's more difficult to tell people something they don't want to hear. And you tell them so that they can improve. But the way you tell them will either inspire them to improve or will inspire them to quit or to file a suit against you. So here's how to get the response that you want when you're telling somebody they're not meeting expectations. It should be supportive, delivered in a non-threatening and encouraging manner. So you don't start out with, you're going to lose your job if you can't turn this around, unless that's really warranted because you've had this discussion before. But you're trying to help people succeed. And so your demeanor, your words, your delivery should try to help them succeed. You are supporting them in their effort to improve. But it's direct so that people know what they're doing. It's specific so that they know exactly what to fix. It's sensitive. They are not going to like to hear what you are about to say. And so you realize that going into the process. It's considerate, not intended to insult or demean. You are not the parent scolding the child. You are adults talking to each other, and you're the one who has to tell them something that they need to improve. It's descriptive. So again, focusing on behavior that can be changed rather than personality. And that's one of the things that we do a lot in coaching is we talk about specific behaviors that need to be changed. People don't need to change their personalities in order to be successful. They need to change behavior that they are exhibiting in order to be successful. And everyone can do it. So when people say, well, you're telling me to change who I am. No, I'm telling you to adopt these behaviors and stop those behaviors, which will help you be successful. So again, it's specific so that people know exactly what you're talking about. Healthy timing. You're telling the person close enough to an event so that it's still relevant, but far enough away so that you're in a good place to send that message, they're in a good place to receive that message. If you're really upset, now's not the time to send the message. If they're really upset, again, not the time to send the message. So wait as long as you need to in order for both of you to be in a good place where you can have this discussion. It's thoughtful. You have thought about what you're going to say. You've chosen words carefully in order to get the response that you want. And most of all, it's helpful. When you're telling somebody they're not meeting your expectations, it's done so that they can meet your expectations. So you are trying to help them be successful. And if you even use those words in your feedback, the only reason we're having this discussion is so you can be successful. That will help you deliver the message that you want. So here's some feedback I received, and if you were in the Difficult Conversations webinar that we had last week, this is one that I used in that, but it's one of the best examples that I've got. Robin, as your supervisor, it is my responsibility to help you be as effective as possible. Therefore, I need to tell you the following. Your directness sounds harsh at times, which hurts the feelings of some of your coworkers. And then she went into examples of things that I had said so that I knew exactly what she meant. You will be much more effective if you soften your approach. And so then she went into examples of what soften your approach means so that I knew exactly what she meant. And so this is effective because it was delivered in a very supportive manner. It was delivered in a time when I was feeling good about myself and she wasn't upset with me. It has all of the elements of effective feedback in it, and it was very effective. It was one of the best bits of advice that I ever received. So one of the things to remember is that different generations require different amount of feedback. And so we start with the veterans, and if you're not familiar with the different generations in the workplace, veterans are folks that were born before 1946. So the baby boomers born between 1946 and 1964. The veterans are the generation that come before them. And so they're also called the greatest generation. Radio babies, traditionalists, a variety of things. One of the reasons they're called veterans is because so many of them served in a war. And so this generation, and a lot of them are still working or want to be working, no news is good news. They were managed under a style that your manager is only talking to you when you've done something wrong. And so for them, they don't require a lot of positive feedback that they're doing a good job. And for the most part, they've been around long enough, they don't need a lot of feedback to know they're doing a good job. They've done it. They know what to do. And so if you're not talking to them, that's usually fine with them because no news is good news. Boomers, again, born between 1946 and 1964, feedback once a year and lots of documentation. So they invented the annual performance appraisal, and we'll talk to you once a year. Xers, so born between 1965 and 1976, someone right around there. Sorry to interrupt, but how am I doing? So Generation X is tentative about asking for feedback, but they like it a little bit more than once a year. And then Yers, and these are the folks that born around 1980 or so. Feedback whenever I want it at the push of a button. Now, the reason that some folks say that Generation Y needs so much feedback is because they're used to getting it. This is the video game generation. And so video games tell you constantly how you're doing. And then teaching styles changed quite a bit. And there were lots of trophies and gold stars given out for showing up. And so Generation Y is wanting more feedback. But here's the other thing about Generation Y. The ones at the tail end of this generation are still kind of young. They need more feedback because they don't have enough work experience to know whether they're doing a good job or not. So here's where things get a little messy sometimes. When you have younger generations who are supervising older generations, and they're giving them lots of feedback, and the older generations don't want it. So I had a Generation Y training participant say to me one time, you know what, I meet with my people once a week to talk about how the week went and their successes and their failures. And I had one older woman tell me, honey, no news is good news. And she said, I don't know what she meant. And I said, you're talking to her too much. She doesn't need those weekly meetings. However, on the other hand, you have older people supervising younger people who think that younger people who are asking for feedback are too needy and don't want to give it. So I had a woman one time who told me that she has a subordinate who asks her all the time, did I do a good job? Did I do a good job? She said, that just drives me crazy. And I said, well, is he doing a good job? She said, yes. I said, are you telling him? And she said, no, because he's driving me crazy. I said, tell him he's doing a good job and he'll stop asking. So I saw her about a month later and she said, you're exactly right. I told him and now he's not bugging me about it anymore. So usually we communicate to have our needs met. And people tell you what they need from you. If you're paying attention, you'll recognize that. And so that's one of the reasons to give people the feedback that they need, the amount of feedback that they need in order for their needs to be met. When their needs are met, chances are they'll meet your needs. After you give feedback, sometimes you need to document the feedback that you have given. Not always, but sometimes you do. And so how do you recognize when you need to give feedback or when you need to document the feedback that you have given? Well, when you want some kind of record of it in case something else happens after that. So for example, if you're telling somebody they're not meeting expectations, you might want to document it in case you have to have a conversation about it again. And so there are different things that go into documentation. A lot of people don't like to document They think it's very strenuous, that it's just so time consuming. It doesn't need to be. But it can be very important, especially if somebody challenges any kind of action that you have taken against them. So, documenting performance, be sure to have the date, the facts and details of the incident, and just the facts, not your opinions, the effect on the work or the people involved. And one of the things is make sure you document good performance. Now, here is some documentation that I received once through email. And email can be a very effective form of documentation and feedback at the same time. So you're killing two birds with one stone. So I had a supervisor once who received an email from a client about me, and then that supervisor forwarded that email to upper management and copied me on that email. And this is what that supervisor's email said. Below is a note from a very happy client complimenting Robin on her training skills. I get the same feedback from clients and their employees all the time. Great job, Robin. And he's saying that to me because I was copied on it. So I liked this. I liked opening up that email and reading this and seeing that he had sent it to all of upper management. That made my day, it made my week, it made my year. This happened years ago, and it's still in my PowerPoint presentation. And so document good performance, and there's a variety of ways you can do it. Again, you can send the employee an email. That's kind of impersonal. One of the things that I've heard that some employers or supervisors do is they send a thank you letter when somebody's done something really outstanding. They send it to them at their home. So the employee receives it at home and can share it with his or her family. So why would you do that? Why would you compliment somebody when they have done a good job? So that they'll continue to do a good job for you. And so this might go back. Some of you might be saying, wow, Robin, you really do need your pats on the back, don't you? Yes, I do. And so does everybody else. And so take the opportunity to give those pats on the back because people will perform better for you when you do. Now, you have to document poor performance also. And so here's some poor performance that happened under my supervision once upon a time. An employee failed to deliver the overnight express bucket on this date, which resulted in supervisor having to drive to Fresno the next day to hand deliver court documents. Supervisor explained to employee that the failure to deliver the overnight express bucket could be detrimental to court cases, hearings, time-sensitive documents to clients, etc. So documenting poor performance. Now, the elements of this are important. We've got the date, we've got the facts, we've got the impact. We don't have any opinions. All we have is facts. And the thing is that something like this looks good in court. If you fire somebody and you have to hand over their personnel file because they're suing you for some reason or filed a discrimination claim against you or something, this stuff looks really good in court. So that's one of the things that you should remember when you are documenting performance is that anything that has to do with disciplinary action, the employee has the right to have a copy of. And that document, those copies, can then be used against you if the employee is filing a complaint or suing you. So that's one of the things to make sure that all of your documentation is complete, the spelling is correct, the grammar is correct, that there's just facts, there's no bias, no opinion, that kind of thing in it. And that, again, will help you look fair and objective. And one of the things to remember is to document verbal warnings. So if you're giving feedback to somebody, they're not meeting expectations, and it rises to the level of a verbal warning, you want to write it down. And some people can't wrap their heads around that because they think, but if I write it down, isn't that a written warning? No, it's not. You just indicate that it's a verbal warning. And so hopefully when you are disciplining somebody, you've got forms, and the forms provide you with a box that you can check that says what kind of discipline it is, whether it's a verbal, a written, second written, whatever. And so verbal warnings are important. And I'll tell you one of the reasons for that is because when I was working with a supervisor on this documentation, the supervisor had told me this is the second time she's done this. I have already given her a verbal warning. And I said, well, where is the verbal warning? And the supervisor said, what do you mean, where is it? And I said, did you document it? And he said, no, it was a verbal warning. Well, that's when I explained you document verbal warnings. And the reasons for that is because that verbal warning may have happened or it may not have happened. We don't know because there's no proof. So that's why you want to have documented verbal warnings, so that when you give the written warning, as we did, and said, this is the second time that we are able to demonstrate it was the second time because of the documentation. So verbal warnings, written warnings, and performance improvement plans. If you're not familiar with these, I really like these. This is when you are telling an employee they are not meeting your expectations, and you clearly spell out in a document as far as what they're not meeting, what they need to do to meet them, giving them a time period to be able to meet them. And so it clearly spells out exactly what they're not doing and what they need to do in order to remain employed. And again, these things look good in court when you are able to demonstrate you have done everything that you possibly can to help this employee succeed. And when you finally have to terminate the employee because he or she cannot do the job, you've got all of this documentation that demonstrates you tried to help as much as possible. Now, these things aren't necessary, but they're good defense for you. And then finally, at the end of our performance management cycle, you are rating the performance on a formal evaluation. So one of the things that I really like is employee self-evaluations. You have the employee evaluate themselves before you evaluate them. And you take a look at that evaluation, and that gives you an indication of whether you've given enough feedback to that employee. So if they rate themselves fabulous in every way, and you're thinking, no, not really, then perhaps you haven't given them enough feedback. Or if they're rating themselves, well, I guess I'm okay, and you think they're outstanding, perhaps you've not given them enough feedback. Also, in their self-evaluations, a lot of times they put down a lot of things that they've accomplished that you've forgotten about. And so that helps remind you. Rating methods, consistency is key. And so if you have the entire company going through performance evaluation, get the managers and supervisors together and go over again what a 1 means, what a 5 means, what an excellent means, what a meets expectations means, all of that stuff, so that everybody is on the same page as much as possible. Because the thing is, after you give employees their evaluations, they compare them, and they have every right to do so. And if you have somebody who feels that they're an outstanding employee, but they've got a supervisor who believes good is as good as it gets, and they're looking at the performance evaluation of somebody else who sees everything as gorgeous when that employee is really not, then you've got an unhappy employee. And so, again, try to be as consistent as possible. That's why it's a good idea for somebody in HR to review all of the evaluations to make sure they're as consistent as possible. No surprises on the evaluation, so you don't save any information up to give at the evaluation. The evaluation should include all of the stuff that you've talked to the employee about throughout the course of the year. And that's one of the reasons why you want to document those conversations, because when you get to the evaluation, you open up the folder and there's all that documentation of the conversations that you've had, and you simply transfer them onto the evaluation sheet. And so it shouldn't be sitting there trying to remember everything that happened during the last year. You've got it all throughout the entire year, and it's just ready to be transferred onto that evaluation form. Give it the time and attention that it deserves. If you are just checking boxes, satisfactory all the way down, and boom, I'm done, then you're demonstrating to the employee that you really don't care about that evaluation, and so why should they care? You don't want to do that. Give it the time and attention it deserves. Again, if you are recording all of the conversations during the entire year, it shouldn't take that much time. The delivery is as important as the document. And so plan to spend 20 minutes or so with employees to go over the evaluation. Give it your full attention. Give them your full attention. Don't have them read it and sign it and then be on their way. Go over it with them. Don't answer phone calls. Don't answer emails. just give that employee your full attention so that they understand that their performance is important to you. And don't spend a lot of time going over what the employee has already done that year. Plan, work, and set expectations for the new evaluation period. So this evaluation meeting should be like driving in a car. Little time is spent looking in the rearview mirror to see where you have been, but most of it is looking out the windshield to see where you will go. So that is performance management, and I'm going to check and see if we have any questions from anybody. If you do have questions, now is the time to ask them. All right, well, I don't see any there, and we're at 11:30. If you do have any questions, you know how to reach me. Thanks for tuning in today, and hope you'll tune in next week as well. Bye-bye.